You have to walk the talk. You have to be authentic as a leader. If you're not doing it, they see that.
It is entirely universal. There's other people who are going through this.
For me, a great leader needs to be able to marry three things: vision, systems, and people.
Welcome to Leadership Moments if this is your first time, and if you are returning, thank you for your support.
This show is about leaders from all walks of life, leadership tips, and maybe even a little of what you wouldn't expect to help you in leadership.
We would appreciate it if you tell someone else about our podcast as we strive to support all leaders that want to just be better.
Let's get on with the show. Welcome to Leadership Moments, where we dive into real, raw, and powerful conversations with trailblazing leaders who shape the future. I'm your host, Tracy Ann Palmer, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by someone who knows a thing or two about making audacious decisions that change the game. John Rossman, the best-selling author of Big Bets Leadership. From launching Amazon's third-party marketplace to helping Fortune 100 companies execute transformational change, John is a master of bold strategy and disciplined execution. And today, we'll talk about what it really takes to place a big bet, how to lead through complexity and risk, and how to build a culture where innovation thrives. John, welcome to the show. John, I'm just jumping in because we've got 25 minutes. That's the only time I have with you, okay? And I want our audience to get as much as they can. You have had an incredible career. You've done amazing things. Why did you write the book, Big Bet Leadership?
Yeah. Well, first, I hope that there's more in front of me here and everything. I don't think of it as a static or past tense thing, but my co-author of the book is Kevin McCaffrey. Kevin ran enterprise strategy and new business incubation for T-Mobile. I got to be the senior innovation advisor at T-Mobile for 3 years. And what we needed to do was build a playbook for the senior leadership team of like how to consider, how to think through new concepts in a fairly simplistic business that was at scale at T-Mobile. And that's really what inspired us to write Big Bet Leadership. Was we couldn't find anything that was descriptive in, well, what does a senior executive need to do differently in actual transformation of a business versus operating of a business. There's a lot of things written for kind of single individual contributors and teams, but there's nothing written for the senior leader. And so, if you think of what leadership is a skill, and it's a skill to guide and influence others for a specific mission. So different types of missions require different types of leadership skills. And so if the mission is transformation, like how do you actually significantly change a company, grow a company, innovate within a company? Well, you have to have a different set of leadership skills required. And if there's one thing that I hope people get from this conversation and from Big Bet Leadership, it's that simple notion that your operating skills not only are the incorrect skills for a transformation, they will actually do damage in a transformation. So it is literally a different playbook to be successful at this. And it's the lack of that recognition that leads to the incredible failure rates of any type of transformation that occurs within major enterprises.
Yeah. Having spent my whole life in transformational roles in corporate, I have to absolutely agree with you. And that's one of the reasons that I really wanted to have you on the show, because we know every single company is going through transformation and does go through transformation over and over and over again. Okay.
And if you think about the future, do you think things are going to get be easier and less change going forward, or more change going forward? Well, I think we would all say like we're heading into an era where there's going to be more change. That's why the subtitle of the book is Your Transformation Playbook for the Hyper Digital Era. And I expand on kind of what I think the hyper digital era is. But in essence, if you think the past 25 years of digital transformation has been something, I think that's going to pale in comparison to what's coming next. So we have to build the competency of being a systematic transformation leader and organization in order to be durable and take advantage of what the changes will entail.
Yeah, you said two very important words. Okay. Durable and systematic. And that is John's formula. If you have not read or listened to anything that John has done around the transformation, the change, you need to, because the system works when you follow it, right? So there's a formula, right, that John is sharing with all of us and those that are in these roles that we're there to drive change and transformation. So John, I want to talk a little bit about your experience at Amazon. And how did that influence this framework for you?
Well, I mean, it changed me in so many ways. I had been a partner at Arthur Andersen before Amazon. I was an engineer. Like I thought I knew a lot of things, but Amazon was just like a graduate school study in so many different facets, both operating facets as well as innovation and leadership facets. But I think in particular, so the first critical habit of big bet leadership is to create clarity, and that willingness in complex topics to actually write things out, debate them, and enforce a level of critical thinking and alignment. That's what clarity is before you proceed on something. And so I learned so many things. I wrote a book called Think Like Amazon, 50 and a half ideas to become a digital leader. So I learned at least 50 things from Amazon, but relative to big bet leadership, that create clarity before you really proceed on something. But guess what? Companies and leaders do the opposite of that all the time, relative to major transformations. They don't really understand the problem that they're trying to solve. They don't have a hypothesis of like, what does it really feel like? Like, how is it going to operate in the future? And yet they still proceed in these things because they go, well, somebody's kind of figuring that out, right? No. As a senior leader, you need to understand those things. And that's one of your opportunities to really bend the curve on these is to like really define, this is the problem we are solving, and this is the future state of what it's going to feel and operate like. And then you can hand it off to teams in order to test that out and prove it out and to scale it.
Okay, so I have to throw something in here because it is a little funny. Okay. In every company, we talk about vaporware, right? You get the flashy deck that sells well at the executive levels, and the team sitting there going, they know that there's nothing under that deck. It is vaporware. Okay. At Amazon, when I was at AWS, which was a short stint, I recall very painfully, but in a good way, okay, the 20-page strategy document that I had to write that gets reviewed by everybody. And guess what? It's clear. Clarity is what John said, because you actually have to think through everything which is getting, reviewed by all of your peers and others and your senior leaders. So you can't fluff anything. And I call that the sustainable operational business model, which means that it can actually go into the business and it has sustainability operationally to succeed. It's not a beta, right? So this is what John is talking about. I just want to make sure that everyone's very clear on that. And I will tell you, John, that was an incredible experience in my life. I'm proud to say that I got a call afterwards to say that I'd done a fantastic job on my 20 strategy document, which, as you know, is a bit of a coup if it's your first one. But it was scary because you really do have to think through everything. So I share that with you because John knows what he's talking about. Okay, let me just tell you.
Yeah. So this way of working, writing and debating memos, it is a different way of working. The one appendix we have in Big Bet Leadership is called Why Memos, and it's kind of the research and all the different benefits, some of which you would never guess at, like you'll be happier if you actually write things out. But it is a different way of working. We designed in very specific recommendations on the types of memos. It got very descriptive because what I found, I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years now of helping teams use these concepts, but teams that don't have this background need very prescriptive and descriptive approaches on like, what do these memos need to address? So we wrote a set of memos specifically for contemplating what a big bet is. A big bet is any high ambition, high risk, high dependency, high complexity initiative that you want to proceed on. And so we have a very specific set of memos that we recommend for that type of scenario. But as you mentioned, like it's a different way of working. It takes some practice. You need a good playbook to help a team do this, but it's absolutely feasible. You just have to be, kind of commit to the work, like kind of going to the gym every day. You got to kind of commit to the daily grind of it. Over time, you'll get better at it. And you'll find it weird and disorienting to work in any other way once you get used to it. You'll go because you'll just spot the incomplete, inconsistent thinking and communication. Thinking through something for yourself is hard, but bringing along a set of people, getting their thinking to contribute, well, that's exponentially harder. You can't do that without capturing it as memos.
That's right. That's right. Now, one of the things I love, is how you break down what feels like chaos into these repeatable systems. Okay, and I want everyone to really listen hard to this. Can you walk us through that big bet framework, especially the mindset, the mechanisms, and the leadership behaviors that come with that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to some degree, that's the entire book is all of those mechanisms and mindsets. But I'll start with the essential framework of big bet leadership. So I get the opportunity to work with a lot of organizations. They invite me in to pressure test or do a QA review of their transformation. And I essentially ask 3 questions. And I do this on an individual basis. I don't do a group interview. I do individual executive interviews. And I ask them 3 questions. I ask, what's the problem we're solving? What's your hypothesis for the future state? And tell me who the most senior person is that's working on this initiative full time. If I interview a group of 10, 3 won't answer the questions because they've realized the trap that I've kind of set for them. It's like, oh yeah, I should be able to answer those questions. I'm not going to go on the record of not being able to answer those questions. The other 6, we'll call it, they won't give me just different answers. They'll give me vastly different answers. We're launching a new product. We're saving costs. We're launching a new technology platform, all in response to the same initiative, right? And so the essential framework is what I call the big bet vector. That framework is a vector has 2 spots on it, right? The first is the problem. What is the problem that we are solving? Fully framed, fully explored, so you can really feel the pain. That's why we call it the what sucks memo, because the goal is to feel the pain that your customer or your operator is feeling. The other point on the vector is our hypothesis for what the future state is, and what are the key things that would have to be true in order to bring about this audacious, radically improved future state. If you can create that vector up front, you have a chance, no guarantee, you have a chance of actually doing what you need to do with that concept over the life cycle of exploring that concept. But if you start off and you don't have that vector, the odds go to minimus relative to your ability to actually do what needs to be done, because we're all working past each other versus like, no, this is the problem and the hypothesis of the future state. So that's the essential framework that is then carried across the whole life cycle, the system, as you say, the system of what you need to do with this big bet.
Yeah. Now, you talk a lot about ambiguity. You mentioned durability earlier too. For leaders listening today who are, standing at the crossroads, maybe they're scared to take the leap. What's the one thing that they can do to shift into that big bet thinking?
Well, the first is, I would say, don't ignore why you're afraid, and everything, right? Like we have pain, we have fear for a reason. It's to protect us, right? And what those things are typically a sign of is like, I don't understand this well enough, right? But yet I'm being asked to participate, or I'm being asked to sign off on something, right? Trust that feeling. Stop, pause, and go, unless we have our big bet vector well understood, we don't proceed relative to this. So, stay in the problem space a little bit longer. And so that would be my advice is likely that fear is coming from a place of wisdom that's telling you like, there's something I'm not sure, but I'm being pressured into this. Don't ignore that. Like, use that. But now you've got a playbook in like, okay, what do I do with that fear? Don't just, my final piece of the advice in the book is to be an active skeptic, right? Active means like we engage in these high ambition scenarios, but be a skeptic, right? You have to test things out. Just don't believe, just don't go along, understand things critically well before you actually commit large to these initiatives. And that's the essence of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, John, I just love what you have just said. And I just want to make sure that the audience got that. Okay. This active skeptic, it's not that you're a naysayer, you're not poo-pooing anything, but what you are trying to get to is, what is the problem? We had Todd Lascelles on, probably now about a month and a half ago. And Todd said he keeps asking the why of the problem until he gets to root cause, right? So don't just take things for face value. What John is saying, what I'm hearing, is know exactly what the problem is. Because in the scenario John's referencing, he's saying all those leaders came to the table and none of them actually had the same story. They all defined the problem differently or the mission differently, which means you're not aligned and you don't really know what the problem is. Right, John?
And remember, the problem is just one half, right? You need to know the problem and what do you think the ideal future state is? Skip over the how we get there, a little bit of unconstrained thinking, right? What's the audacious, radical improvement? And if you can't name what that audacious, radical improvement is, well, maybe this isn't the concept to proceed with, right? But, would you ever proceed on building a house if you didn't have a plan for what the beautiful new house is? No, you would never proceed on that. You would never just say, we're building a house here and we'll figure it out as we build. Organizations go about major investments and major transformations all the time without actually having a view of what the beautiful future house is that they're building.
Yeah. And, if you had that vision, you're a lot more likely to get there.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can't, here's what you can't do. If you don't understand both the problem and the future state, you can't test the critical things that are necessary in order to get there. Skepticism actually isn't about being negative. Skeptic means I have an experimental mindset, right? Like, I'm going to prove things out. I don't just accept things that I'm being told. I want to see evidence relative to it, right? Like that's what a true skeptic mindset is. And that's why being an active skeptic is, I think, the right mindset. Both of those words are expected and needed. but you have to test critical things out before you make big commitments. And so big bets suffer in general two types of failure modes. One failure mode is we go for an audacious outcome, but we actually don't test the critical things that must be true early. We wait until the very end, and then we figure out, oh, it's not quite what we believed it was, right? But the other type of failure point is where you don't have ambition and you actually don't work to dramatically improve your value proposition, your business, your operating model, your technology, like whatever the big bet is. Well, that's a failure point too. And so while big bets all have an incredible failure rate to them, that failure rate doesn't count the errors of omission, the errors where we didn't take a big bet, but where they were needed, right? And if you look at the great brands out there today that have tumbled from their perch, I'm talking about companies like Boeing and Intel and Nike and Starbucks and Disney and GE, the list goes on. All of those companies failed because they stopped actually taking calculated risks in the right way.
Totally agree.
And that's why big bets are needed. Big bets are hard, but they don't need to be complex. And that's what big bet leadership does, is bring a system to these essential bold moves that are needed in order to maintain and create competitive advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go behind the curtain now a little bit and get to know John, the corporate executive and the human being behind it all. So what's something that you've unlearned as a leader of your career? A belief that you really had to just let go of in order to grow.
Yeah. So I got, when I was a partner at Alvarez & Marsal, I got some great advice. Took a couple of times to get this great advice from another partner of mine, which was I needed to learn how to value efficient time. And what he meant by that was, I was a dad, I was a partner, I was running a lot of clients, big teams, and I was hyper focused on effectiveness and productivity and everything. But there are those moments when you need to just have effective time, meaning inefficient, effective time. And that's something I've had to learn, is just like, hey, there are times when things should just be messy and we should just hang out and do things together, right? And so that's something that I've had to learn and relearn a couple of times.
Oh, John, me too. I'm kind of one of those people, I'd travel with my team, and my team would be like, oh, we're going to go and have fun. And, and I'd be like, really? Like, I just want to go work. It's so bad. It's so bad. Yeah, it's so bad. Anyway, yeah. So I think I'm going to have to learn those a few times myself. So before I get to some fun parts here, what is one piece of advice for our audience, executive leaders, mid-management leaders, those aspiring to be leaders? What's one piece of advice that you would love to give them, and perhaps you wish you had learned earlier in your career?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is something I've had to rewire myself on, but one of Amazon's leadership principles. So I wrote a book called The Amazon Way about Amazon's leadership principles. And one of the leadership principles is think big. And while I think that's critical, I think they forgot the other half of that leadership principle, which is think big, but bet small. And that's the title of one of the chapters in Big Bet Leadership, is how to have an audacious, ambitious vision, but how to recognize the critical things early that must be true and figure out a way to test them. And so you actually proceed in a very calibrated manner. We wrote this book for companies and for leaders so that they can be successful at these things. They don't all go great, but you should still be able to be successful in them. And that's the mindset that's needed, is to think big, but bet small.
Yeah, I love that. I really love that. So I want to just do a quick fire round. Okay. one sentence answers only. What's a bet you took that changed your life?
It was leaving Alvarez and Marcel and kind of leaning into keynote speaking and individual advisory work. And we kind of did that as a family. We moved from Bellevue, Washington down to Southern California full time for 4 years. And it was both as a career, but more importantly, as a family, it was just an adventure, and an adventure means it's unpredictable. There's peaks and valleys to it, but it was a classic adventure.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so great. What's one book every leader must read besides Big Bad Leadership and the other two?
Yeah. It would be Good Strategy, Bad Strategy by Richard Rumalt. And that book will change the way that you think about what actual strategy and planning is, and you will become such a better strategist by reading that book.
Wonderful. And then what's the most underrated leadership trait?
Strategic communication. And I think in Big Bet Leadership, we talk about becoming the chief repeating officer. The key is knowing what to repeat, right? And of all of Bezos' skills, I think his strategic communication skills and repeat is just such a power move. And so I think it's, be the chief repeating officer.
I love that. Never heard that before. That's really good. Okay, your leadership mantra in one sentence.
Think big, but bet small. To some degree, would be my leadership mantra. I'm always like, what's the moment? What's the context relative to that? But I think as an individual, as teams, as leaders, as companies, I think there's a big hesitancy to be too ambitious. And I think having ambition is really, really important. Michelangelo has a quote that goes like this: the greater risk is not that we think too big and miss our mark. It's that we think too low and hit it. And I think that captures that essence. I think we should be more ambitious in for both our companies and for our own careers.
That's fantastic. I love it. So John, listen, thank you for so much wisdom that you've imparted today. Big Bet Leadership, it's more than a book for the audience out there. It is a leadership playbook for all of you, especially with all the transformation that is only going to speed up. So to everyone listening, go place your bold bets. And remember, fortune doesn't just favor the bold, it follows those who lead with vision and grit. Thanks for being on, John.
Thanks, Tracy.
If you enjoyed the show, please go to leadershipmomentspodcast.com to subscribe to the podcast or on your favorite player, as well as follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn.
You can also send us a message on what you like and don't like, or what guest you want us to have on the show.
So until next time,
this is Stacey Castor, and what doesn't challenge you won't change you.
And I'm Tracy Ann Palmer. Be the change you wish to see in the world.